What if the key to calmer, more fulfilling parenting was hiding in plain sight? Well, today our guest, Crystal Haitsma, discovered it while homeschooling her 4 children across continents. Today, she's here to unpack a unique blend of psychology and real world experience, offering a fresh perspective on how to ditch parenting guilt and embrace a more connected approach with your kids. Hey parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self-care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's rock and talk. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, Crystal Haitsma, who's here with us. She is from the Parenting Coach and is a certified life coach and Canadian homeschooling mama who just got back from traveling the world with her family of 6. She combines her background in psychology with helpful coaching tools to help moms and couples with shame-free connection-based parenting. So can you tell us, first of all, Crystal, thank you for coming on the show. It's great to have
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your passion, who you are, and what you love to do.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the short version is that I'm a mom of 4 and I have some kiddos that are neurodiverse, and this is pre-diagnosis, but eventually there's ADHD and anxiety and high functioning autism. But I was really struggling with parenting. I knew about attachment connection based parenting. I read a lot of books as soon as my kids were little, like probably toddlers. I started researching this. And so my kids at this time were like 5, 9, and 11, I think. And then I had a baby and really struggling, especially with my neurodiverse kiddo and parenting him not great, but also feeling like it was like his problem. Like he needed to get therapy, he needed to get medication, he needed to get fixed. And then I would be able to parent in the way that it read about in all these books. So that's when I dug more into this. And I actually had like just one meeting with a therapist who was well versed in this. She works for this kind of, it's called the Neufeld Institute, but they talk a lot about attachment. And so she only supports the parents in supporting the kids. And I was like trying to convince her, like, no, it's my kid. You need to do something here. And she just like lightly and gently helped me see that he might be like this forever. And then how did I want to show up? Like, how do I want to show up even if he doesn't ever change? And I was mad about that when she first said that, because I was like, there's no way that I can handle another 8 years of how life was at that time. But it also helped me to turn inwards and recognize my own maladaptive behaviors, the way that I was reacting to his reactions. And as I started to change and transition after that, I noticed really huge changes with him. And these were huge shifts that I was making. Like it would just be small little ways of change. For instance, I can remember him freaking out one time, and instead of me freaking out at his freak out, I just turned around and went into my room and shut the door, just laid there, probably cried. So I didn't really do a lot except try not to react to his big emotions. And over time, I tried to spend more time with him, like connection, relationship building type stuff. And his behavior changed completely 180. Like it was entirely different. The frequency of his meltdowns, the intensity of his meltdowns, it was non-existent in a way that probably isn't what somebody would say is medically possible. Like they would send you to behavioral therapy and they would tell you to put your kids on medication and whatever. And I don't even think that he could have gotten as good as he was with those things. He was just so changed. And I realized that the only thing that had changed was me. And I was like, oh, okay. So I actually have a bigger role to play in this. Anyways, kept continuing on that change and eventually went to go look for my master's program because things were going well enough at home that I felt like I could take on something more because I homeschool my 4 kids. And I found the life coach school, decided to become a life coach. The rest is history. That's been like 5 years ago. And I've transitioned a lot since then. So my main focus now is just helping people with shame because I see shame at the root of why I was reacting that way, why I was triggered in the first place, what was actually happening in my brain. Wasn't a conscious response. I wasn't deciding, like, oh, I know what's going to be helpful. I'm going to yell at my kids right now. That will help the situation. Like it was all very unconscious and things that I didn't really recognize before. Years later, now that's what I help people do. I love to help people get to the root of what's actually bothering them. And it can be in parenting, but it can really be in any area of their life. Anytime that we're feeling a trigger or like an emotional activation that's strong, that feels stronger than maybe what the situation warrants, there's always shame below the surface. There's some belief that I have about myself that probably came from my own childhood. And so as we dig that out and process through some of what's coming up for us now, then we can naturally show up in the way that we want in all of our relationships. So
Yeah.
that's my business. And then simultaneously, we've also homeschooled for a while, but my husband and I started online businesses over the last few years and then have done a lot of traveling while we're homeschooling and yeah, dealing with teen years and depression, anxiety, all the things in a very different approach than I would have ever known of before. So those shifts started happening around 2016, 2017. By 2019 is when I started my first certification.
So when you said depression, anxiety, are you talking about just with your kids and parenting
Yeah.
or in yourself?
No, with my kids. Yeah. Looking back, like we didn't know a lot about postpartum depression and anxiety when I was having babies. And I never resonated with it. They were like, oh, lay in bed all day. Is it hard to get out of bed? Is it hard to do the things during the day? None of that resonated. But anger and rage, like deep anger and rage. And now what we know about postpartum anxiety and depression and the way that we speak about it is so different. So I likely dealt with for my first 2 kids some postpartum depression and anxiety that looked very different than what I was being told it should look like. So I always passed all the checks. They were like, oh no, you're good. If you're still feeding your kids and you're getting out of bed, then you're fine. But my kiddos themselves dealing with their own like hormonal changes and emotional changes and moving and just all of the things that kids go through and just helping support them through, I think, what most teenagers deal with now.
And how old are your kids right now?
18, 15, 11, and 9.
Our kids
She's going
line
to be
up.
9 in like a week. So yeah.
Yeah. Our kids line up exactly, except for I have a 17-year-old, almost 18-year-old.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Going through the very similar parenting things and journeys as we talked about before we started recording this episode today. But yeah, I love what you shared about your journey and how you are focusing on shame and really getting it dialed in on how you can best help people. So if you wouldn't mind, I know you're getting away from this a little bit more, but as far as with parenting, especially you're in your own journey and traveling, like how has this helped in your parenting and what can we do to maybe apply some of those things?
Yeah, I think that there's often shame below the surface without us recognizing it. If we were raised in shame based homes, and if you were listening to this podcast right now, you probably were. Even if you're like resistant to that, you're like, my parents were good parents. I'm not saying your parents weren't good parents, but all of the information that was out there, all of the parenting support that was out there was all intensely shame based. And so, unless your parents were like very forward thinking, they likely were using shame tactics. And so this doesn't even have to be something super overt like yelling or spanking or locking somebody in their rooms, which were often used also. But it can be things just better, or your sister would never do that. Or why did you do that to me? Or like you're hurting my feelings. You're the one making me mad. The kinds of things that likely you heard on a pretty regular basis, or your parents going like stone cold, like ignoring or pretending like you're not there or something. So I've heard it all, but if you're raised in that environment, shame is going to be below the surface for you in your parenting, and it will inevitably show up in your parenting. And so anytime that you're feeling very reactive, like blaming defensiveness, anytime you're feeling very people pleasing, like I have to make them feel better, I have to get rid of their disappointment, I have to solve this, or anytime you're shutting down and withdrawing, either emotionally or physically or both, Shame is below that. Those are the three shame shields. And that is how we respond to shame. And that is how we know that shame has been there. So when I look at my parenting, I don't ask, where is my shame? Show me right now where my shame is, because there will be something inevitably. And as I start working through that on my own, over time, I become less activated. I'm less triggered, less frequently, less intensely, which just means that I'm more able to show up in a way that feels congruent. So, feeling congruent is like what I consciously and logically want to do. I know that I want to respond to my kids with respect and with connection, with love, with compassion. And that might be where my logical brain's at. But all of the shame stuff we're talking about, all the childhood stuff is in our subconscious mind. So subconsciously, my brain just flips its lid. It's like, no, actually, we're going to scream and yell here, even though we're like, wait a second. So tried for years to stop yelling because lent more to that way. I run a little bit more hot in that area. And I tried forever, all these conscious tricks to try and stop yelling. And it wasn't until I started doing this other work that felt completely unrelated to my yelling, that my yelling went away entirely. Like, I don't ever feel rage ever about anything. And I don't ever yell. And not because I'm trying to not yell. I never stop myself from yelling. I don't feel that level of intense reaction anymore. And I was for sure a yeller. Like, behind closed doors yeller. My friends would be like, just ask my husband, ask my children. They will tell you. I'm sure I seemed very lovely and amiable in real life. But anyways, so that was what happened for me. And I think that as we uncover this, we recognize that it happens in other areas of our life. And the transition that I've been making with work has been helping people specifically with this. So it doesn't matter if it's like an employee that's triggering you at work, or if it's like something on social media that you see, or if it's when you jump on the weight scale and you see a certain number or a certain number in your bank account, right? All of those things can be triggering. It's not just our kids. Kids are just often the best triggers. We recognize them more strongly. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I actually feel pretty good about my parenting, there might be other areas of your life where this is coming up. And in some way, we're attaching our identity, our belief, our something to something external. Shame is not enoughness. That's the best description of shame that I feel. And in some area of my life, I'm feeling that not enoughness somewhere deep down. And again, consciously, you can believe you're the best mom ever, but it does not matter if your subconscious mind is not on board with that belief, because your subconscious mind is what's going to rule the day when your kids don't listen 17 times, when your kids skip school, when they start struggling with depression, like when things pop up and you're feeling very activated about it. It's really what's happening in your subconscious mind that actually matters. Consciously, I probably thought I was an awesome mom. If somebody had asked me, I would have been like, yeah, I'm doing a great job. But subconsciously, under the surface, when I'm like laying in bed thinking about my day, I'm like, am I actually messing them up? Am I actually adding to their generational trauma and not like fixing it? Did I actually totally mess up today? Or are they just going to turn out to be like, I don't know, robbers or something when they grow up? Remember this one kid that I had I still have him, but never listened to me. And I was like certain that he was going to end up in prison one day because I was like, no, he never ever listened. Anyways, who knew that it was so much of what was happening inside of me and not my personality, not a personality trait, not a character flaw. It was just all this gunk that I had held on to since childhood that I didn't recognize was there. As we do our own shame-free work, it clears us up to act in a way that is more congruent to how we want to in all areas of our life.
Very well said, and very much something that I focused a lot on too. So everything you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely. For those that are watching the video, all the nodding that I'm doing here. Really appreciate what you're sharing though. And for those that don't know a lot about this, I think you're completely right that it's so tied to shame and those deep rooted beliefs that are
Mhm,
subconscious, like below the surface that we're not aware of. Now,
mhm.
your coaching and all the things that you're doing, what do you think are some of the top ones that you see, those deep rooted beliefs, sometimes like their I am statements, whatever, that they have that are some of the biggest ones?
They're all the same, but you might not resonate with them at first. So I'm going to give you some higher level I am statements first. I'll give you an example. When I was going through this at the beginning, when I started realizing that there was something a little bit more happening behind the scenes, this same kiddo that I was like certain was not going to end up well, never listened to me. And in fact, so much so that I got his hearing tested because I was like certain that he was deaf. He's not. They were like, no, he has excellent hearing. But I had a little brother that struggled with deafness. And so I'm like, okay, no, like this, there's something happening in his ears. There's not. He has perfect hearing. And I was like, what is going on? And so as he would not listen and I'd ask him over and over again and he would like pretend like I'm not there, I was like, okay, what is really bothering me here? And I would ask myself a series of questions. So it usually started with, what about this is really bothering me? So at the top level, it's going to be something like, he's not listening to me and he should. Okay, that's true. But what about that is bothering you? If it's true that he should be listening and he's not, well, kids should listen to their parents. Okay, why should kids listen to their parents? Good parenting means that you ask once and your kids respond immediately and do what you say without arguing. That's what good parenting is. And I was like, okay, well, if that actually is what good parenting is, then what bothers me about that? What really bothers me is that maybe I'm failing as a mom. Maybe my parenting is not good. Maybe my whole purpose in life right now is parenting because I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. Maybe that thing that I say is so important to me is the thing that I'm failing at. What does that mean about me? Maybe that means I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. So the beliefs at the very bottom are going to be, I'm not enough. I'm not seen. I'm not heard. I'm not loved. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of respect. I'm not worthy of belonging. It will sound something like that. But the higher up layer of that will be something like, maybe I'm a bad mom. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm unproductive. Maybe I'm not good at my job. Maybe I'm inadequate in some area. So it's like layers. So often if I just pulled out, okay, you don't believe you're enough, you'd be like, nope, I do. I feel good about that. So you have to layer it down because it doesn't feel consciously like that is there, but it always is somewhere in some arena. So I look in my life now for resistance, something that I'm resisting. It could be an area that I feel pressure in, an area I feel like urgent or rushed about. It could be a goal that I feel like is super impossible. There are lots of ways that you can dig down to where the shame is beyond just like the natural like reactivity, like blame and defense type responses. So yeah, those are the ones that I see over and over again. And maybe you've done enough work that you already resonate with those right off the bat and you're like, yep, I see those in my life all the time. But if you're like, no, I don't think so, the next time that you feel a really big emotion when someone says something or doesn't do something, ask yourself that series of questions. So it's just things like, why did that bother me? Or what really bothered me about that? Or if that's true, what meaning am I attaching to that? What am I making that mean about me? And as you dig into it, I call this intuitive journaling. Intuitive journaling is asking myself deeper questions. I'm not looking for broadness. I'm not looking to write pages and pages about what's happening. I'm looking to get deeper, to ask myself a question that will get me to a deeper level. Whatever those words are, whatever that phrase is for you, it'll feel connected emotionally. It'll feel like usually I'll see like tears in somebody's eyes, or I can see that their face kind of shifts because there's emotion there, or it'll feel like very true. Absolutely. Like the grass is green and I am failing as a mother. Like those two things feel just as true as each other.
I'm going to circle back around to what you said earlier. You said that I never feel rage and I never yell. Like for listeners, I'm sure that is impossible as a parent. I cannot do that. And
I
yeah,
always
what
thought
you're
it was impossible for me.
right.
Absolutely. For
So
sure.
you're saying that if you really get to, and I agree with you here, I do a lot of trauma work with my clients,
Mhm.
but if you get down to that core of it and do some of this shame work, that they would be able to get to that space, hopefully too, where they are not so activated, not so triggered, where they can show up in a better way to their kids. Is that what you're
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I remember signing up for this online program. This is before online programs were even cool. That was like a stop yelling challenge. Maybe it was like sent in like blog or text or something. I don't even know if there was like videos people watched online at this time. And it was ideas on how to get you to stop yelling. One of them was to put your head in a freezer so that you could snap yourself out of it. Another one was to have an elastic band on your wrist and flick yourself every time that you yelled. So this is a very behavioristic way of looking at it. None of those helped, by the way. Don't do them because there's a reason. It's like when a mosquito bites you, you don't choose whether or not it's itchy. Like it just is itchy.
Yeah.
And that was how my reactive parenting was. I wasn't choosing in that moment, let me scream at my kids. I don't think people choose that. That is the mosquito bite itching and it just puffs up and it's itchy. And I think that the work I'm talking about is this deeper work of going inward, going into our subconscious. Healing is often a word that you hear and I say, but I would say that healing is actually just remembering what the truth is about us. So, all of those beliefs that I mentioned that people talk about are all false beliefs. They are thought errors. They are beliefs that we took on from our parents, from our teachers, from people at church, from people in our community because of the way that they interacted with us. Eventually, those beliefs became solidified like concrete in our mind, where we were just like, yep, this is my self identity. And not the kind of self identity that we even recognize consciously, but it's like there under the surface, always going. And as you do that work to heal, quote unquote, heal, that just means recognizing the thought errors, recognizing the ones that aren't actually true, and unbelieving them to leave room for the truth. But this is easier said than done because it's not a conscious thing, right? If you could consciously talk yourself out of, I'm actually not a bad mom, then you would already be where you want to be. Like I never consciously was able to talk myself out of yelling, no matter how much I tried to talk to myself about it and beat myself up about it. It would just happen every day. So the work is deeper work. It's more in the body. It's more feelings work. We can get into what that means, but it's a different kind of work that you do. But as you do that work, absolutely, that's where things change. Things change with your partner. I work with a couple where the husband was very volatile and the wife was pretty much, it's the end. I'm not going to stay in this kind of relationship anymore. And he did not recognize that it was like all of this past shame stuff coming up for him. And as we worked on that, he was able to recognize when he was feeling triggered, pause. Sometimes he would first start freaking out and then he would pause, leave, go do his own work, reset himself entirely, feel completely different energetically, and come back and be so vulnerable and be like, you know what actually was bothering me about that is that I felt like you were telling me I wasn't a good enough partner. Didn't have anything to do with what was actually happening. And then they're able to have this beautiful conversation where they both feel even more connected at the end and feel more connected through the process. So it works for more than just parenting. But yes, I think that if you're somebody that struggles with yelling or shutting down and withdrawing, it can show up in a variety of ways. We can get to the space where we don't feel like that's part of us. I used to just feel like it was me. Like if somebody had said, "Oh, tell me a bit about you," I'd be like, "I'm really impatient and I lose my temper a lot." And that just felt like my hair is blonde. And it's not. That's my nervous system. That's beliefs. That's identities that I've taken on. That's negative reactions that are happening in my mind for a reason. And I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that it's a personality trait.
Really appreciate you saying there's so many good things I wanted to talk about with that, but I'm trying to think where to hone in on here. So it's just really doing that deep work because it's connected to everything. Actually, when you said this is about parenting, the place my mind went first was like, oh, this feels like it would come up so much more. I'm thinking about my clients and myself personally in your marriage and your relationship
Mhm.
because that's often well, they're both very likely places to
Yes.
get triggered and activated. But it seems like another adult that you're spending the most time with is where it's coming up, at least in my life, more often. And yeah, exploring that because there's so many layers. And I know even doing my own deep work for quite a while, I'm still unraveling some of those layers and getting a little bit deeper and a little deeper and
Mhm.
very much like less activated. And yet I wonder if I'll ever totally get to the bottom.
Myself that question, I'm like, is there a life where I am never triggered? And I did meet somebody who said that they'd done enough shame free work that they felt like they didn't ever feel shame anymore. And so I asked her about that. I was actually taking a training from her about shame. And I asked her that question and she paused for a minute because at first she said yes. And then she's, you know what? Probably 90% of the time I can feel like I'm just able to not be triggered, not be attached to what somebody's saying or doing or whatever. And then the other 10% of the time I am, but maybe not as intensely. And I would say that's how I feel now. And I'm able to recognize my triggers more, like when it comes to my husband or when it comes to the weight scale or a number in my bank account or something that a client says or doesn't say or whatever, or somebody quitting or something. I'm able to feel it. And now I know how to process it. So I don't worry so much about never feeling that way because I actually think there's some really beautiful lessons we can take with us. The lesson from me diving into this belief of like my deep inadequacy can help me sit with that, feel with that, move those emotions, and then move to this other space of truth where I'm like, I wonder where that came from. That doesn't actually feel true anymore. I think that both are necessary. And so I'm not looking for a life where I never feel that way. I'm looking for a life where I recognize that and I know how to move it energetically so that I can live more of the time in this other space of feeling calm, feeling untriggered. And I actually think that's how we help people too. Because if I'm people pleasing, that was my other big tendency. I'm not allowing people to sit with their own discomfort. I'm taking it away from them. I'm trying to make everything good for them, right? My kids, my husband, my friends, whoever. But if I don't react in that way that I used to, and I don't feel triggered by that, and I don't do those people pleasing tendencies, and I just am who I am, they still hold the discomfort of what they just did or what they just said, right? They say something unkind and I yell back at them. I'm not letting them hold it. We're just tossing it back and forth. Think of it like a hot potato, like you used to play. I used to play this like hot potato game, like turn on the music, or I don't even know what you turned on, but you like pass the hot potato when you didn't want to get stuck with the hot potato. And I think that's what shame is. Shame wants to grow. As soon as I feel shame, people around me are going to feel shame because of how I'm responding to them. I could feel shame because of something with my kid, but I'm going to spread my shame to my husband and to my friend or to somebody at the park or whatever. And so I think of this work as I'm dropping the hot potato. I didn't even pick it up. And if I did, I pick it up and I drop it and I stop the spread of it because of that work that I've done. And then it leaves other people probably deeply uncomfortable because my response is not what a normal response would be. Somebody starts freaking out at you on social media, your normal response is going to be to freak out right back at them or give them, cite all the sources about why they're wrong. Like you're going to respond from that energy. And when you don't, people very uncomfortable with that. It's not the norm. And I think it gives people the opportunity, the permission to be like, oh, what is this discomfort inside me? And what do I want to do with that?
I love all of the trauma work and the results from getting deeper and seeing some of that energy released and not being so activated. And it does feel like for a lot of my clients, even for me, that it was a long process. Can you recommend for listeners that feel like they want to start that journey, probably feel some apprehension, some fear around that, but just a
Yeah.
few simple things to do to start?
I would say it doesn't have to be a long process and that it can be as long as it needs to be. Like I release any expectation around the outcome, what time things have to change or how long it takes to change. And I actually think the release of that helps it be more simple and probably more quick. And I like to think of my emotions like kids. So if I'm feeling frustration, a kid is coming and telling me that they're frustrated. And I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen to that kid. I'm going to listen to the words that kid has to say in the energy that kid would say it. Right. Frustration isn't going to be like, I'm feeling this way and it's coming from my childhood and blah, blah, blah. Like frustration is going to say, like, how dare he say that? I can't believe he did that was so rude that like he doesn't even care about us. Right. I'm going to listen to those words. So I usually have like a spot in my house that's like mine. So I'm going to go to my own little like spot in my house where I feel is my own little space. And I'm going to do this process. And I think of it like communing with these kids. So this kid comes up and it's going to tell me all the things that it's going to say. And I'm going to listen to it in the energy it wants to say until it's released everything it wants to say. And then I'm going to sit with it for a minute, just like I would if it was actually my kid. They're coming up to me. They told me all the reasons why they're so mad at their brother that they stole the Lego or whatever. And I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to everything that they have to say. And then I'm just going to sit there with them because really they just want me to sit with them. They don't want me to fix it. They just want to be seen and heard, which is often less words from me. And as I'm sitting there and doing that process and sitting with them, I might ask myself, is there anything else they need? Do they need a hug? Do they need words of comfort? Do they need me to rub their back? And I'm doing this in my mind. This all might sound very out there to you, but like it works so effectively. And I don't mean to you, but I mean to the listeners, as I'm doing this process, they're telling me what they want to tell me. I'm sitting with them, I'm figuring out what is it they need. I'm imagining myself giving that to them. Sometimes my clients have said things like balloons or an ice cream or something like it doesn't have to make sense. You're just in your mind kind of doing this process. Eventually, you'll feel that energetic shift. They will feel complete. They will feel heard. They will feel like they've released it. And so will you. And there's lots of different subconscious processes that you can do, but that one to me is the most simple and it's effective every time. And it's like what people would call like inner child healing, because there is a wounded part of us that has come somewhere from our childhood and is taking the time to listen to them and to be with them, to give them what they need. And I move through that a few times, maybe a lot of times in one trigger, right? Maybe I'm working on my relationship with my husband and maybe I'm feeling this way a lot. So I'm going to get into my journal. I'm going to ask myself those questions. Like I mentioned, what's bothering me about that? What's underneath this? Why is this bothering me? I'm going to do that work often in my journal. I do that on myself every day. Every day I look for something to journal about in that way. And I do this same meditation work, the same subconscious work every day. I dig into what is coming up for me. Where's my feeling? What's happening? And as I do that, it opens myself up to a space of like more intuition and self trust and belief in myself. Yeah. So that's where I would start. It might feel uncomfortable first, but I would do that as often as you can. And what my clients find is usually they feel better one session in. Like one session, they'll be like, wow, I already feel so much better. And within a few weeks of doing this, you'll feel less reactive already.
That is beautiful and a wonderful promise. And I agree that stuff like this can happen. It is creating a space that there can be that stillness. Like you said, you have a room or
Mhm.
something like that. But to journal, to do those processing questions, and we'll have that either in the show notes or in the blog, or you'll be able to
Mhm.
access that, what she's saying. But I love that, just those different questions that you're asking, making sure you're feeling seen and heard. Is there anything else they need? Recognizing that energetic shift. But really healing that inner child, yes, but reconnecting with yourself in a way that maybe in the go and just fast-paced world, we don't stop to slow down enough to reconnect with ourselves or to heal that inner child.
Yeah, we don't like to be alone. One of the things I recognized from working with so many people is that the more you resist stillness, meditation, or aloneness, the more you need it. And so if whatever we're resistant to is the thing that we actually need. And so oftentimes when I start this work with people that are a space where they're like constantly thinking or constantly doing or constantly numbing social media or Netflix or whatever it is that you do to numb, when you release all of that, it leaves you with so much discomfort because you're going to sit there and be like, ooh, there's a lot of feelings coming up. There's a lot of thoughts happening. There's a lot of beliefs in my head happening. And I want to also reiterate this isn't just work for only moms or only women or only parents or only anybody. This is like if you are human, you feel shame. It's one of the things that connects us most as humans that we all feel this way. So it's not asking, do I deal with shame or not? It is show me where my shame is right now. And your mind will answer you. It'll be like, this just happened the other day and that kind of bothered you. What was underneath that? And I think that as we move to the space, I feel like that phrase of like hurt people, but
Mhm.
heal people. And if I'm a healed person within myself and a hurt person comes and starts like throwing their hurt at me and I drop it, that in itself is healing, right? That is giving them the opportunity to really look inward themselves as I am more myself authentically instead of trying to mold, form, shape myself to what I think my employer wants, what my friends want, what social media want. I give people around me permission to do the same, where they can like really just be themselves without trying to perform or get external validation or whatever. Yeah, so that's my work. I do this work every day on my own self, and I still haven't got to a space where I'm never triggered. Been doing it for a while. There's always something new that comes up. And I think anytime we go to a new area of growth, it'll come up again. So I might feel pretty good. And then we're like, let's start a business or let's get a job promotion or let's go back to school. Like your mind wants to grow, it wants to learn, it wants to become. And so then you'll move to that. And then that will be a whole new area of learning, whether it's in spirituality or in school or work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed that same thing myself. My husband and I are looking into PhD programs right now. He's also a therapist. And we're like, are we ready for that next step? But we know what it does for
Mhm.
relationships, for all of these other things. And I don't know. We'll just do some more deep work, it sounds. But yeah, everybody kind of has that where it mixes it up again. And just, yeah, these different things that you spoke to today I feel like are a great place that people can start to slow down and to at least try this, at least attempt it, and have that courage to lean in and do some of that deep work so that they can show up as their better self, as their best self to their children, even just personally, but also in their relationships. This is something that's so beautiful as you continue to lean in and do that deep work. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today and just speaking
Yeah.
to some of these things. It was wonderful to hear this fresh perspective on it. Where can we find you if anyone wants to reach out?
So I have a podcast, the Parenting Coach podcast. And just recently, I actually had somebody interview me on that. And we went through an experience like this where we tapped into this space where I helped guide her through that. So you can go and listen to that if you're curious how it would sound. I have a couple guided meditations on there that can guide this process if you're not quite sure where to start. You can find me on Instagram at the.parenting.coach. And my website is coachcrystal.ca. And I love to chat with you. So if you hear this and you're like, this part really stood out to me, or I completely disagree, you can also say that and we can have a conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll put that in the show notes so that they can find you. We loved having you on the show to speak to these things that really do resonate with all of us, like you talked about. We all can push through this shame element and we understand what it feels like, what it looks like. So thank you for speaking to that.
Thank you.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.